right, we're going to head back and go see Edmund and give him some cat food. All right, we're going to talk about Say Anything. It's a 1989 teen romantic comedy directed by Cameron Crowe. We're going to get into the writer later. I'm going to guess Cameron Crowe wrote it, but I'm going to find out. John Cusack plays Lloyd Dobler, an average student that's also a kickboxer. And he is a lover. Now, Ione Skye, I do not know how to pronounce her first name, but it looks like Ione Skye. She plays a character named Diane Court, who is the valedictorian of her high school. That's the highest honor that a high school student can achieve. And they also speak at the graduation. There's a line in Say Anything. And Lloyd Dobler talks about it. Lloyd Dobler, John Cusack's character. Lloyd Dobler says, I gave you my heart and you gave me a pen. Because she gives him a pen because she leaves him. I guess so he could write. You know, it was like a symbolic act. And plus she was the valedictorian. So it was the highest honor that a person could get when graduating school. So she not only breaks his heart, but her class level outdoes him. It's like the worst breakup movie. But there's a beautiful moment in it where John Cusack, who plays Lloyd Dobler, takes a Sony stereo thing with a tape in it. It's basically like a tape cassette. It's got the song In Your Eyes, I believe is the name, by Peter Gabriel. He puts the tape cassette in the jam box. He turns it on and he presses play and turns it all the way up and holds it up over his head. And he stands outside of Diane Court's, house to get her attention. Because they once made out in the car listening to Peter Gabriel's song on the radio or something. So he wants to recall that moment so she won't forget. He tries to do everything to win her heart, and yet she gives him a pin. Anyway, John Cusack is coming to Fort Worth and Dallas. I'm going to be there. I hope the tickets are affordable. And if I ask a question, I'm going to say, what do you think the writer was talking about when he said, I gave you my heart and you gave me a pen? That kind of thing. What's going on there? I might ask that question. I think that's a more secure question. You got to come up with these ideas when you do a question. And also another thing, did you train as a kickboxer during that film or something like that? I don't know. There'll be something like that I ask. It'll be a question. It'll be an important question. And it could change at the last minute. I went through all this when I went to the Actor Studio Drama School and with James Lipton. And he knew that we would probably have to do this throughout our career. That we would have to talk to movie stars before other people. Even if it's a couple people. Or if it's one person. Or go this way or this way. Yeah, I'm saying go this way. But what I'm trying to say is that what was the symbolism that Cameron Crowe was coming up with the whole pin and the heart? Well, what did the writer mean? What was the writer talking about? Was it that she wanted him to be a writer, or did she want him to write letters only? It's a heartbreaking ending. It doesn't really wrap up in the end. She leaves. It's not a happy ending. Poor Lloyd Dobler. The sad thing. And great title. That may be it. What do you think Cameron Crowe, or the writer, was talking about when he said, say anything, for the title of this teen romance drama, which John Cusack is still talking about, even today? Now, everybody knows I'm writing Skinny Pete and Friends, teleplay, a Better Call Saul sequel. It's a sequel. It's really titled Skinny Pete and Friends, teleplay, a sequel to Better Call Saul. But regardless of the title, we are going to move into some motivation about Skinny Pete. Skinny Pete is interested in the Guitar Man for one reason only. A lot of people don't realize. Skinny Pete plays the piano very well. And a lot of people don't even realize it in the show. So the reason that Skinny Pete goes and investigates the Guitar Man in Brooklyn, and the Guitar Man is with Ella, the chick from Mies Russia, his girlfriend. Skinny Pete goes over there with Badger as backup, to speak with the Guitar Man because secretly he wants to start a band while he's in New York City. But he wants to develop his YouTube show as well and interview the Guitar Man. That's what gets him there in the backyard of Waverly Place in Brooklyn. Gets him up the tree, into the kitchen, where we find out that the Guitar Man has the entire place rigged, basically, as a bomb. Yeah, the place is rigged with bombs. Think of Fight Club kind of thing, okay? We're getting like a color code of Fight Club. And they get there and they're in there, and he tells them, the Guitar Man goes, do you know what you're surrounded by right now? Look around. And they look around, and he says, I've got the whole place rigged. We know who you are. We know you're working with the authorities. The demon says to grow up. The demon says to grow up. And they're like, what? The demon says to grow up. The demon says to grow up. And they're like flipping out. And Ella's like, chill out, chill out. They're like, sit down in the chair. Sit down in the chair. They're like, okay, dude, just don't kill us. So they sit down in the chair, Badger and Skinny Pete. And that's whenever he handcuffs them and ties them and makes sure that they're handcuffed and tied up. Now, this is in the Brooklyn place. The Waverly place is what they call it. It's in a place called Waverly. It's right off the Fulton stop. If you know where Fulton is, the Fulton train station, the subway. So they're in this crazy abandoned house, tied up. And he goes, and now we're going to get to the money. We know you know some powerful people, dude. You got 500,000 subscribers, and we know you got money. Give us the phone numbers, and we're making the call. And that's whenever they get a hold of James McGill and Kim Wexler. And that's whenever they have to get a hold of the, what do they call it? It's like Bitcoin. It's like stuff where you store money in the dark web. And Kim knows how to do it. Kim Wexler's been doing this stuff because that's how she got James McGill freed from prison. She bought his freedom by paying off judges and stuff. Kim Wexler is kind of in this version. Kim Wexler is kind of the corrupted one in this version. James McGill's trying to go legit and run this YouTube show for Skinny Pete and friends. See? So at that point, you know, when they hear the phone call and they know this guy's a psycho and he's tied up, they're tied up or they're handcuffed in Brooklyn on the second floor of this abandoned house, they can even send them footage, video footage of Skinny Pete and Badger tied up. So James McGill receives it. And then Kim Wexler's like, they're really going to kill them, you know. They're really going to get these guys. We're going to have to give them money. And they realize, you know, it becomes a hostage negotiation kind of thing. Meaning they're telling them, listen, we can end we can end all of them. He shows the bombs, you know, the whole place is rigged up to go, and they believe it because the Guitar Man's kind of like a revolutionary kind of nut kind of guy. You know, meaning they could walk off from the place and blow the whole place, demolition the whole place, and nobody could come and get them or anything. They don't know their locations because they make sure their phones are turned off, and they tell them that, which is interesting. Okay, that they make them turn their phones off and all that kind of stuff, because that resembles what went on with Charles McGill when Charles McGill was still alive. It kind of reflects it in a way if you look at the series Better Call Saul. Only this is with a new character called the Guitar Man, who Skinny Pete wants to become like a band member with. So they get in this weird situation. Well, they do end up wiring the money to the Guitar Man. And it's like quite a bit of money. We'll talk about the numbers later. But it's at least a few $100,000 to let them go. At least one of them, which would be Skinny Pete. And they hold Badger for the other $100,000. So Wexler's only able to get a hold of probably $100,000 off the dark web and then release Skinny Pete. And Skinny Pete is released, and he goes to get help, of course, to tell the authorities. Then they eventually get the other $100,000 to release Badger. So it's a total of $200,000 just to release these two. They're finally freed, and the Guitar Man takes that money with Elle and they skip town. They immediately go right to Los Angeles because the guitar man wants to use that money to start his whole thing. And all he has to do is just change his name and his appearance, which Guitar Man can do, because Guitar Man's like completely genius. They don't even know his name. Anyway, that's the motivation behind a lot of it. It's mostly because Skinny Pete plays piano, and that's how he gets himself into trouble. Of course, James McGill and Kim Wexler bail them out. And that gives you some of the reasoning in Skinny Pete and Friends Teleplay, a sequel to Better Call Saul. All right, back to Skinny Pete and Friends Teleplay, a sequel to Better Call Saul. So Skinny Pete is released first. The money gets to Kim Wexler, or the message. But Kim Wexler basically gets the money from the dark web. She's able to send it to the Guitar Man's account, and they release Skinny Pete, who immediately goes to authority to repeat that Badger, his friend, is kidnapped. Now, they know they have to work fast because they released one of them. To release the second one, which is Badger, they get another $100,000 because they could still blow the place. Badger's released within, I don't know, a few moments afterwards. And Badger and Skinny Pete finally meet up on the streets of New York, and they're just, you know, they're exasperated. You know, they're flabbergasted at the fact that they survived it. They're just amazed that they didn't get killed by the Guitar Man, because they just wanted to talk to the Guitar Man, you know, about starting a band, basically. And the next thing you know, they're being held hostage. This guy's really, really crazy. The Guitar Man takes L, and because they have the $200,000 for the releasing Skinny Pete and Badger, they immediately take the first plane out of New York City before they could even identify who the heck they were. They never got their real names. L only went by L, and Guitar Man only went by Guitar Man. So they have no idea who their names are, and neither do we. But regardless, they fly all the way to Los Angeles. So the next day, basically right after the release of Skinny Pete and Badger, they're walking around Hollywood with $200,000. Guess what? Over time, we revisit Kim Wexler and James McGill in New Mexico. And they make a phone call back to Skinny Pete and Badger and realize that they're okay. And that they'll come back and visit and do another vlog, you know, about New Mexico or whatever, so they can continue their YouTube show. Because Skinny Pete and Badger, they vlog everything. It's just a show about everything. Now, what ends up happening to the Guitar Man and L is amazing. They end up securing the song called The Demon Says to Grow Up. And it becomes like a top 10 hit in Los Angeles, because they can develop it with the $200,000 that they have. So they go to a studio there and they decide to record it. And they record it and they slowly start to become famous. And lo and behold, guess who somewhat recognizes the song? Skinny Pete. Now, lawyers are drawn because they finally figure out who the Guitar Man is. Now, here's the thing. The Guitar Man has a disguise, very similar to what David Bowie kind of did. So in his presentation of the Demon Said is to Grow Up, he's wearing like this Gene Simmons kind of outfit, doing the whole full body, well, not the full body, but the full face, you know, like kabuki style makeup kind of thing, where you don't even really recognize him. Exactly kind of how Gene Simmons was with Kiss, but only Elle is also in the band. She has like a tambourine or a shaker, and she also has her face painted, so they're disguised. But they recognize the song because they use the same lyrics. Lawyers are drawn because they know that they were the ones that kidnapped Skinny Pete and Badger. The only problem is they can't prove it. They never really saw the Guitar Man, not really up close. They could recognize his face, but it's still only alleged because they never show their face when they have the two kidnapped. Lo and behold, they're served papers to be sued for kidnapping. And they show up in court because the Guitar Man's a complete genius. So we get back into the courtroom. The guitar man knows he can't be busted. Because for one thing, the whole thing was just a performance. In his eyes, because he videoed it. The whole thing was for his particular show and for what he did. Because he sent that footage to Kim Wexler and to James McGill. So when they get into court, they have to prove, was it real or was it false? Was it part of the performance or was it merely just him flipping out? When they go back to the Waverly place, they look at the barrels. Guess what they're full of? Water and sand. It was fake. It was like a jackass kind of, stunt to get the $200,000. So they have to prove in court. And if they prove that they thought it was real, then James McGill and Kim Wexler will get the $200,000 back. But guess what? They can't prove it. And the guitar man gets to keep the $200,000 as well as his rising, I guess it's like a number one hit. It's like a top 10 hit, The Demon Says to Grow Up. Now, this is loosely based a little bit on Cowboy Mouth, Sam Shepard's Cowboy Mouth, because you got to read Cowboy Mouth to understand what went on with Patti Smith and Sam Shepard when they did it, of course, and the ray gun and all that kind of stuff. You have to read Cowboy Mouth to understand kind of the meaning and what was going on with those two. Which would be Guitar Man and L. It was a stunt, it was just there to give them recognition and stuff like that, and the $200,000, because they thought they were really kidnapped, but they weren't. It was just part of the show. So that's what they have to prove. It's kind of an interesting little aspect in a courtroom kind of thing, because some of this stuff has happened like with NWA. If you know who the NWA, people were actually arrested for selling NWA recordings. If you know anything about Ice Cube and NWA, they would go to the record shop and they would arrest the manager because they saw them as revolutionaries that were against authority figures like police and stuff. They were just completely crazy. NWA was. But they found out in the end through, I think it was through the Supreme Court, that it was called freedom of speech, even though that their behavior was crazy and they walked around with AK-47s and were talking like they're going to kill everybody. Later, Ice Cube would write a song called Body Count. So it has that kind of energy behind it, the revolutionary aspect. So their song is put on trial. The Guitar Man is put on trial. L is put on trial as really being crazy. And James McGill and Kim Wexler want their money back, But they realize in the end that art wins, not law. Okay, we're going to look at a footage of Fort Worth. There we go, kitty. Look at that kitty. In the whale shark tunnel. Look at that kitty. Oh, just doing the whale. There is the whale shark. Look at him. Kitty, we got new cat food. Linda got you some very good cat food. And we're going to try it out. right? 13 millimeter with a kind of a Dutch angle kind of thing. There we go. Very good. And back to zoom. Look at that kitty. Look at that kitty. Just bathing in the glory. All right, let's get some food. Come on. And it looks like this is what we got. I don't know the full name of it, but it's called Beyond. It's wild-caught Alaskan. Then we got Tasteful. It's a turkey entree. He's probably going to have half of one of those. And then we got Signature, which is flaked. And this is skipjack tuna. Ooh, he's going to like this one. Shrimp entree and broth. But we're going to go with this one for tonight. All right, kitty. Here we go. There we go. Look at this kitty. Right from PetSmart. Here, run along this way. It's a big vlog tonight. Yes, we do. Look at that. Look at that kitty. Look at that kitty. Yes, you are. And great kitty. Just great. Very good.